So good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Volunteer Management During COVID-19. We are happy to have both Amy Potts and Allison Crawford with Serve Kentucky here with us today to talk about the impact the crisis has had on our volunteers and what we can do to help us carry our missions forward as we move into this new normal. But before we go any further, I just want to take a brief moment to review the functionality of our Zoom webinar. Right now, I have everyone on mute to avoid background noises that may distract us from listening to the webinar. And for this presentation today, we will not be using the chat function. However, if you do have a question, please enter them in the Q&A box. You can find that by clicking the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you do see a question that is similar to yours or one that you would like to make sure that we get to, you can tap the thumbs up icon to the left of the question, and that will move the question to the top of the queue. At the conclusion of Amy and Allison's presentation, we will answer any questions that come up. And for questions that we don't get to by the time that we end at 10:15, we will answer offline and follow up via email. With that, I want to now invite Ann Coffey, our CEO, to say a few words before we begin. Ann?
Thank you, Merv, and a special thank you to Amy and Allison from Serve Kentucky for being here today. We're excited to have this conversation. I also want to welcome everyone. It is a great crowd, and we're glad everybody could be here. And I want to thank our members and supporters who enabled us to bring you this webinar today. Our webinar series is designed to bring you some of the very best thinking on how to navigate this crisis and beyond. I'm just wanting to make sure that you're signed up for our e-news and that you have seen our COVID resource list. And if not, please go to our website at cnpe.org, and it's really easy to sign up. It's free, and we encourage you to do that. Good news and breaking news. For those of you that participated in our check-in survey, we'll be releasing those results today. So look out for that. There's a lot of informative information that may help you and your boards think about how to navigate next steps. And if you have any questions about it, you're always welcome to reach out to us as well. And finally, I want to invite you to join our nonprofit community connection group on Facebook, where you can share and learn from your peers, and together we can begin to explore our future together. So I'll close by saying thank you. Thank you for all you do for our communities that you love. And as our governor says, we will get through this together. So please take care of yourself and remember to have a little self-compassion. Okay, Merv.
Awesome. Thank you, Ann. Now I'm happy to introduce our presenters today. Amy Potts manages the Service Enterprise Initiative, a volunteer management certification program of the Points of Light Foundation. Previously, Amy worked in nonprofit management, providing educational workshops and technical assistance for nonprofit organizations and local governments. Allison Crawford has broad experience across the nonprofit spectrum. She has reported and produced for public radio, coordinated volunteers for a women's shelter, coordinated communications for Kentucky Equal Justice Center, and served 2 years as an AmeriCorps Vista. This experience has given her a comprehensive understanding of the challenges faced by organizations and the many ways in which volunteers are essential to nonprofit resiliency. So thank you both for being with us today. And Amy, I'll go ahead and turn the controls over to you.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for attending today. As Merv said, I'm Amy Potts, and I work as the Volunteer Development Coordinator at Serve Kentucky. And today we just wanted to have a conversation with you to let you know a little bit about who we are, that some of the resources that we have, and to so to give you some ideas for some tools and resources. And if you're like us, you've spent the last couple months kind of trying to figure out some new plans, maybe tweak some existing ones, and you've watched a lot of webinars. So I hope that we have a couple new ideas for you today, but really we wanted to just share who we are, the resources we have, and then get some ideas for you too at the end in the question and answer section. So as I kick off, I'm going to start by telling you just a little bit about who we are at Serve Kentucky. So Serve Kentucky is a state government agency. We're the State Service Commission, and our mission is to try to actively engage as many Kentuckians as possible in volunteerism, really to positively impact communities across our Commonwealth. So what you may know us most for is we are the state government agency, the administrative oversight for AmeriCorps programs in Kentucky. So if you're familiar with AmeriCorps programs, I think we may even have a couple on the call today. We are the administrative oversight for those 20 programs, and we help with training, technical resources. We are their conduit to our federal agency, the Corporation for Community and National Service. And as you can see on this map, our members, our AmeriCorps members, have great impact across the state. So we have at one time as many as 800 members working in 105 counties right now. So 20 programs, and we've expanded our capacity greatly over the last years. So that's one of our biggest programs and what we devote a lot of time to, but we're also working on our mission of increasing volunteerism in Kentucky. So we did receive a grant from the Corporation for Community and National Service called the Volunteer Generation Fund. And so it helps support nonprofits like you all in volunteer engagement and management. We work with capacity building, we do trainings, and we have resources, and we partner with great organizations like the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. So we're excited. We are only in year 3 of this. So while it's always been our mission, we are greatly trying to expand the outreach we have to organizations such as yourself. Okay, so I told you a little bit about like what Serve Kentucky does, but today we did want to talk about just some ways of new engagement in this really unprecedented time. You know, no one was really prepared to deal with many things with this crisis, but especially maybe volunteers, who, as we said, really are the heart and soul of a lot of our programs. So today we're going to talk a little bit about pivoting strategy, and that's just some things that you can do with if you're still working with in-person volunteers. Some of your organizations have remained open through the process and have relied heavily on volunteers, and so you may already be doing a lot of this. Some of you are anticipating reopening very soon. And some of you, like I said, have not had any kind of disruption to the services that you've given to your clients. So we just are going to go through a couple strategies when you do welcome volunteers back in person. And then we were going to share with you some new ideas for engagement. So it's kind of different. Some of us are working from home. Some of us are in an office. So what are some ways that we can stay connected with our volunteers to make sure that they don't kind of lose their passion for our mission or organization or their desire to volunteer. And so they're just some ideas. Some of you are probably doing a lot of these things or even other creative ideas. So we're excited to hear about that maybe at the end in the question and answer section. And then I wanted to talk briefly about the Service Enterprise program, which is a volunteer management training through the Points of Light. And Serve Kentucky was just certified to administer this training last year. We've done one cohort, and we're interested in doing another one this fall in the Louisville area. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that Service Enterprise teaches on kind of looking at where you are and where you want to go. So sometimes this might be a good time for us to all take a little kind of inventory of some things we might want to change and tweak with our volunteer programs. And then finally, we're going to wrap up today with some tools and resources. We have a wonderful volunteer management platform that is free for nonprofits called Volunteer Kentucky, and Allison Crawford, my colleague, has really been instrumental in launching this and is excited to tell you about it, and hopefully it'll be something your nonprofits are interested in utilizing. So I just kind of wanted to take a pulse of where everybody is. And I found this great resource called trackitforward.com, and it's an organization that does data tracking for nonprofits and for volunteer programs. Some of you may be familiar with it, but they did sort of they did a little survey, an industry-wide survey of kind of how COVID-19 is affecting those in the volunteer management community. So, and the reason that I show this is sort of looking at how this is really affecting your peers and your volunteers may help you frame kind of how you plan moving forward. You're not in this alone. I think we all know that, but sometimes it feels pretty lonely out here. So some of the statistics you'll see up here are kind of interesting. 25% really not concerned at all, which I find interesting, but 41% are incredibly concerned about their jobs. And we know that there's also going to be financial repercussions for our nonprofits and for fundraising. A lot of you probably have had to cancel or postpone or move how you do an event, like a fundraising event. So that's obviously a pretty big concern. 26% in this survey had already gone remote. And as many as 23% had done like a partial shutdown. So it's affecting everyone kind of out there in different ways, but definitely affecting our industry as we know it. So Track It Forward always kind of also looked at the biggest challenges that you might face in your volunteer programs. And I know many of you can relate to these problems. Number one is kind of how do you provide essential services? If you're closed, the CDC guidelines, you want to keep everybody safe. How do you provide essential services with these closures? Number two, rebuilding momentum. So this I think is a big one for volunteers. How do you keep your volunteers engaged and how do you retain them after such a long break for many of you? And then of course, how do you keep your volunteers healthy and safe? So that's got to be first and foremost on everyone's mind as if they bring back volunteers in in-person capacity. For community building, that's a real tough one for me because I'm a people person, I'm very social. When I've worked with volunteers, I like to do in-person things to help with engagement. So how do you keep that going in this virtual remote world? That's definitely a challenge. And then 5, engaging volunteers in the same way. How do you keep them interested? Are there programs and things that you can do during the break, which answers number 6, to help with remote engagement? Are there things you can look at that maybe a volunteer can do for you remotely that they haven't been in the past? And so these are all challenges, and what we're going to do is kind of talk about ways to pivot your strategy for your in-person volunteers and then ways to meet these challenges with new ideas for engagement. So pivoting your strategy, we talked about how this is a term that nobody really used until about 3 months ago, and now we're all pivoting. And so pivoting gracefully, we hope. But when you are bringing volunteers back in, or if you already have, there are a couple key things to keep in mind. Communication is absolutely key, which it always is, but at this time of uncertainty, for all of us, and especially our volunteers, it absolutely is. So make sure you're completely transparent on all of your procedures. If they're, who does your volunteer report to? What are all the guidelines that they have for coming in? If they need to do a temperature check, which a lot of us, when we're going back to Healthy at Work, are having to go through, make sure that these policies and procedures are clearly communicated to the volunteer with, and it could be something as easy as just kind of checking in every once in a while and saying, things are changing really quickly. We don't know right now, but we're going to have some more information soon. So it's a way to keep volunteers coming back and engaging them is with that communication. Obviously, and this goes without saying, you have to prioritize safety when you're working with any of your clients or volunteers. And of course, we have been given a lot of great guidance on our COVID-19 websites through Kentucky.gov. And then I hope, you have a COVID-19 resources board with CNPE. So there's lots of great information out there on how to make sure, but you have to make that, of course, first and foremost, and that involves a lot of internal discussions with leadership and staff as well as volunteers. And then that brings us to bringing those volunteers in. It's a great time to bring volunteers in on decision making. So if they're the ones that maybe are going to have to shift their work remotely, or if they're the ones that are coming in and it's going to look different, their shifts are going to look different, it's a great time to bring in some volunteers and make them a part of the policy making that's going to directly affect them. So also consider if and how volunteers can work remotely. So, and I know that, and in my experience, this is a little easier said than done because you think, oh, there's all these great things, but do they have the tools and the resources to do things remotely. So do they have the computer equipment they're going to need, the access to the information? Do they even have access to the internet? These are all things that, that you should ask before you set up some remote programs, and be strategic in how you plan that, because it is a good time to move some volunteer work remotely, but it just takes some calculating of if you have the tools and resources. And then a lot of you have probably encountered this too. You have to plan for a volunteer workforce shortage. And of course, we've heard a lot about how a lot of our volunteers may be in a vulnerable population due to age or pre-existing medical conditions. But then a lot of what I'm hearing too is a lot of our volunteers are have school-age children. And school's been out for a couple months now, and is definitely a lot of the summer programming is out for the summer. So it's not only that this affects the vulnerable population, but it could affect your volunteers of other areas because of family obligations. And so that could take a toll on how you plan out what you do with your volunteers. So it's always good to maybe take a quick survey at the beginning and say, you know, if school were to stay closed, how much could you volunteer? You know, how many hours do you think you could do? You were doing this many, you know, and then that way you can maybe plan for programs as you reopen based on what kind of volunteer participation you're going to be able to get. And then just understand that that COVID-19 has really had multiple effects on multiple people, and to keep that in mind, especially on your volunteers. You never really know what anyone is going through, and so it could be that it's affecting a volunteer in a very in a medical way, in an anxiety way, or in a financial way. And it's just, you know, all of our volunteers deal with these very real responses to COVID-19. So, you know, encouraging your volunteers to be really cautious. I loved how Ann Coffey, you know, encouraged us for self-care. That's really important, because it's not only kind and safe, but it's really going to promote kind of an equity within your organization and for your volunteers too. So we've talked a little bit about kind of when you bring a volunteer back on, or how you're reforming your programs maybe, or kind of how your volunteer workforce works. But now I just wanted to run through some new ideas for engaging volunteers if you are shut down, if they're working remotely, if programs and things are going to change for the near future. So this is some ideas to keep them engaged, keep them coming back, to be the awesome volunteers that they are for your organization. So again, we go back to communication. It's obviously really key, even if your volunteers aren't on site. So you want to be calling your volunteers to check in as much as you can. I even like to have a little communication plan to know how often check-ins are happening. Obviously, you can update them via email, but you can also organize virtual meetings. And you know, we've had a lot of success with Zoom, and we've had some success with Microsoft Teams. Whatever works for your platform and your organization. We probably talk more as a staff now via Zoom, because we were all sort of going in different directions when we were physically in an office together. So it's been really nice to have that touch in every week to know what's going on. And so I think that's important to remember for volunteers too. And then also post updates on social media and create all new pages just for volunteers. I know that Ann spoke about having a resource page on Facebook for CNPE members. It's a great thing to do for volunteers too, because a lot of us, you know, you think back to why you volunteer. You love the mission, you love the purpose of the organization, but you also love the friendships and the bonds that you make. And so, you know, if people can kind of keep up with each other outside of that, it's really important. And I do understand that that takes a certain amount of curation on staff time to be able to manage another social media platform. But it's just an idea if you have an active group of volunteers. Also look at some new projects. I know that maybe I'll be really interested to hear if you guys have had any luck with moving to virtual fundraisers, because that's something that a lot of people have had to pivot, as we say, and move to. I've seen a group that I work with moved a 5K to a virtual 5K, and I think did better than they thought they were going to do with the engagement on that. And the thing is, you know, right now people are we're reopening. people are starting to go out into the world more, but as you have people kind of as a captive audience at home, you know, these virtual fundraisers can be a great way to say, hey, we're still out here. Please still support us. And so volunteers can help you with that. They can be really creative and help in those ways. Volunteers can also be brought in to maybe this is a good time to stop and provide some feedback on what you're currently doing. Maybe it's the way you onboard a volunteer or the trainings. You know, now is a great time to kind of take a survey of volunteers and say, what are some methods or processes that you think don't work so great, or what do you think we're doing really good? That can be a part of their volunteer time. And then also, this is a great time for volunteers to share stories and produce content. And even if it's related to what they might be doing for COVID-19 relief, or if it's related to what they've done in the past and are doing for your organization. We can't have enough of really great stories about how our volunteers impact our work and what that impacts for them. So this is a good time to kind of challenge your volunteers to share their stories and create that content. Also a time to develop some remote programs if you're not doing it already, because now we've been sort of inundated with lots of new technology. So is this a time to move some of your tutoring to a virtual platform? Maybe that if you work with educational groups, maybe that works now in the short term when it's a little harder to get out and tutor people. But also maybe that's something that could be incorporated into your program in the long-term planning, because some volunteers, it may work better with their schedule to do some virtual tutoring. And then also definitely checking in video with calls with clients. That's something volunteers can do too. And then helping develop trainings and webinars. It's a really great time to kind of make sure that all of your trainings are in order, and a good time to kind of work on developing those more. And so some of you may be working with COVID-19 as a part of your mission, and others aren't, because it just wasn't a part of your mission. So this is a way to engage volunteers and to keep that community building, like we talked about. If you wanted to get together groups to do things like make cards for nursing homes or put together care packages, I think there's still a need for face masks now that we're going out into the world and need to wear masks. And there's always, you know, check-in calls with high risk. Maybe it's your clients or other people that volunteers can get together and help with. And then also a really good time to pull your volunteers in for administrative tasks. So if they haven't already, some creative ideas I've heard of with research projects. I know we had another call where someone told us about a state historical society that was using volunteers in this time to put the call out to do some research on different topics and some genealogy. So, you know, that you can think outside the box there and how you're engaging volunteers to use the internet and other resources to help. Great time to look at your website with a fine-tooth comb, or to have your volunteers do that too and make sure all aspects are working well, or to tweak volunteer handbooks, because everybody loves to do that. So it's a good time, but you know, it's a good time to bring your volunteers to look into that. We actually had some things that we needed translated into Spanish at Serve Kentucky, and so it would have been a good time had I had a list of volunteers with those credentials to say, could you translate this for us? This is something we need to get out pretty quickly to make sure we're communicating with other language speakers. And then of course, data entry is something that never gets canceled, right? I mean, it never, there's always data entry. And so these are things you can look at, promotional materials. And we're gonna talk a little bit later, just for a couple slides, about bringing in, this could be a good time too to bring in other professionals to do some skills-based or pro bono work, and designing promotional and marketing materials could be a good time. That could be a good way to use a skills-based volunteer. And then also just look beyond volunteering. If you've worked to build a community with your volunteers, which I know you all have, what are ways that you can stay connected that aren't necessarily have anything to do with volunteering for your organization? And I've seen some really creative things where people have gotten their volunteer groups together to organize a book club, a virtual book club, a virtual movie night, even scavenger hunts for families. Just ways to say, I'm a part of this team and I'm so proud to be a part of it. And so when you do maybe ramp back up for volunteering, then everybody is ready to go and gung-ho again about your organization. So I am excited to hear some of your new ideas, because I know that you guys have probably been doing some great things to keep your volunteers to check in and keep them keep the anxiety level down and to keep them engaged in what you're doing. So when we do move forward, and we will all have a new normal, that we can continue right on with services. So now after that, I just want to tell you, I'm going to change a little bit to tell you about the Service Enterprise. And Merv brought this up earlier. It's a training program that Serve Kentucky participates in, or that we're the hub, we're the lead trainer, and we're actually going to be working with CMPE to try to bring this to the Louisville area in the fall. Now, much like all of the rest of you all, we've had to change plans a little bit because of this. So this could even be a virtual training. We're just kind of looking at how that might work out. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about it because I hope that some of your nonprofits are interested in participating. And then also just a couple points, like I said, about bringing in maybe skills-based volunteers, which is what the Service Enterprise really works on. So the Service Enterprise is a training through the Points of Light Foundation. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with them. I do want to give a little plug. They moved their conference to an online, completely virtual format, and it's going to be June the 10th through the 12th, and it's free to all. And they have some really great speakers. There'll be some actually some presentations on Service Enterprise on that too. I can get more information out. Murph has already maybe shared with you or has that, but it's something that if you have the time to sit down, it's free and it's a good resource. So you could familiarize yourself with the Points of Light if you don't know them already. Service Enterprise is a volunteer management training that they launched probably 10 years ago after looking at industry research that showed that, you know, when organizations really move volunteerism up in their organization, when they make it a fundamental part of who they are, it helps them scale, it helps them achieve their mission, it helps them grow in ways. So when volunteerism isn't just a role, it's an actual department that is funded and given attention to, then it'll lead to what they call a service enterprise, which is an organization that fundamentally leverages volunteers and their skills to achieve their mission. So the training is several parts. We do a pretty thorough research-based diagnostic, which is free to the organization. And you go through that and it sort of tells you areas that you could tweak or areas that you're really excelling in. There's 16 hours of team-based change management training. And so we put together a cohort. The last one we did, I think, went really well because they they networked. It was a great peer exchange too. Then you get individualized coaching outside of that training too for any challenges or anything, any resources that you need help to find. And then it comes with, when you've completed all that, a national certification saying that you are a leader in volunteer management. And so we're super excited to bring this to Kentucky. We're still kind of working through the pilot phases, but we're super excited to bring this to the Louisville area as well this fall. So I wanted to talk a little bit, introduce you to Service Enterprise, and then some of the things that Service Enterprise really focuses on is planning and development, effective training, and kind of looking at your current processes. So I thought, what a better time than when we're maybe at home or we're kind of trying to retweak some of our programming anyway, is to look at some of these Service Enterprise methods. And one of them is to kind of do a process analysis of how you bring on board volunteers. So you can sort of look at, we call it the as is to the to be model. So if you look at what it is as is now for a volunteer when they walk in the door, this is a good thing to bring a volunteer in to help you with too. So are all of your processes streamlined? Your interview, your application, your interview, the training. Can some of this training be moved to a virtual content, which is going to help you with recruitment, maybe if we aren't able to open as we were before? Where are the gaps in there? So do you have a volunteer leader program? Do you have a volunteer buddy program? So when a new volunteer comes on, are they brought on board to know kind of all of the processes of the organization, all of the ins and outs of the organization? So maybe that's a gap. And then kind of really think about where you want to be when a volunteer steps inside and has been around for a month or two and goes through comes and has a talk with you and says, this has been really great. Everybody, the orientation was perfect. I knew exactly what to expect. So that's something that you can work on now, is kind of looking at your current processes. And then something that we work through with Service Enterprise too that I liked, I did this when I started with Serve Kentucky, is I just did a basic needs assessment. I did a really quick survey, but what had happened that hadn't happened before was that staff were actually asked for the first time, where could a volunteer help you? And so we have a lot of different departments that hadn't necessarily used volunteers before, and it was an exercise in creative thinking. And maybe our financial department actually could use some help. And there's a creative way that we could bring in somebody with those skills to help with that. And so I just quickly thought of some questions that I wanted the staff to answer. And then I thought of other people too. So I gave this to staff, to our leadership, to some of our commission members, because we have a volunteer commission that oversees our agency, and then also to some past volunteers and some current volunteers. So I got all of that, and I was able to then put that into a document that I could share with leadership that said, I think we could really insert volunteers here, and this might help our efficiency with this new marketing that we want to do going forward. So asking those questions, creating this need assessment really helped me come up with some action planning steps for Serve Kentucky. And then also I've seen this work with the other organizations we've worked with, and it kind of came up with new and different roles that volunteers could fill in our organization. And one thing that might lead to is how skill-based volunteers could be a newer part of your volunteer program too. And I think some of us really work with pro bono a lot, but skills-based is a broader definition of pro bono. So pro bono is someone that has a lot of expertise maybe in their field, a lawyer, an accountant. Skills-based could be a volunteer that you already have that may be helping you with direct service to your clients, but they are a phenomenal marketer, or they are a whiz at building websites, or they are just the next social media influencer. So, they have these skills that can be brought into your organization. So when you've done your needs assessment, if you can kind of come up with some areas where you think that you could use a little more expertise, what you can do is put together a plan to recruit. And the first thing you would do is to look to your current volunteers and be very specific about the needs you want filled. So you could say, we are looking for someone to create a social media marketing plan. And then you list it out and be very clear about those expectations to both volunteers and the organization. And then also make sure that you have some staff to help lead that when you're going into recruiting. And those are just a few kind of best practices for when you're working with skills-based volunteers. And I know I went through that uber quickly, but it's just a little piece of what a more intense service enterprise training has and involves. And I think it's something that we all can work on right now, which is working on planning for this future, even if we don't exactly know what it looks like, but we can take this time, if we're fortunate enough, take a breath and kind of think about where we are and where we want to be. So I am excited to hear your questions about all of that when we get through with this. But right now, I'm very excited to turn this over to Allison Crawford, our Volunteer Generation Fund Associate, because she has done great work on our Volunteer Kentucky platform, and she's going to tell you all about it. And hopefully it's something that your nonprofit or organization would like to take advantage of. There you go, Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So now that Amy sort of walked us through some ideas on how you can pivot your strategy and reformat some of your programs to fit the times we are in now and the times that we are expecting, either with a volunteer shortage or switching over to different ways of going about providing our services and engaging volunteers, I wanted to tell you a little bit about a tool that Serve Kentucky is able to offer through the Volunteer Generation Fund, the federal grant that funds our work to support nonprofits in Kentucky. So it's a volunteer recruitment and management platform online. It's web-based, so it's all cloud storage. But it's sort of like Volunteer Match, but it has this robust volunteer management tool to back that recruitment as well. So for me, it would be really useful, you know, to put together a quick board report on how many volunteers do we have, how many have we had in the last month, how many hours have they served. That's where I think it can be really time-saving and effective. It saves you all of that manual data entry if you're using like a Google Sheet or an Excel spreadsheet or something. But as we move forward into this more virtual or sort of combined virtual and in-person services and volunteering, it would be a great way for you to advertise your needs to new volunteers, and a great way to sort of record virtually how people are volunteering from home or off-site, because they can check in from wherever they are on this website. So it is, Amy, let's go to the next slide and I'll show you. So when people log in, it is going to show them this dashboard, and it will summarize how many hours they volunteered, the impact value of those hours, as well as some other things. If you see on the right-hand side, if I had some volunteer things in here, it would say which organizations I'd volunteered with, how many hours there, and it also will give your volunteers a volunteer resume, which is really useful, I would say, for students or people who are applying to universities or other things, to be able to just have this, all of their volunteer information put into one thing. So I think it's not only useful for a volunteer manager, but it gives a lot of information without you having to compile it to the volunteer that can help them stay motivated and engaged. They're like, oh wow, I didn't realize I had volunteered 8 hours and it felt, you know, very doable. Why don't I do a little bit more? So I think that's a really great way to sort of get your volunteers engaged through this as well. I want to show you what it now looks like when you have a profile. In the list of agencies, you would have one of these little tiles. So it just gives a brief overview, your logo, your title, and then people can click on any of these for more information. So we're going to look at 12 Baskets Food Pantry. And this is what their profile looks like at the moment. It just gives a short description of who they are and what they do. They haven't uploaded any photos, but the Red Cross has some photos up there, and it makes their profile a lot more engaging. It shows volunteers, this is what it looks like to volunteer with our organization. It also, if you see over here underneath the logo, there are, it's listed as causes. And so they are meeting some basic needs. That's what that little code means. But that's just a way that volunteers can filter and look for your organization by their interest or by the cause that they're most interested in. So there's basic needs, there's healthcare, there's a multitude of things. It'll also give your contact information a little bit lower on the screen. You can't see from this picture. It gives a little Google map of where you're located, which is helpful for anyone who may be wondering, like, how long does it take me to get there? Or is this in my area? And then below that, you can link out to your website and your social media and everything. So even if you already have your own volunteer management software, like the Red Cross does, they still have their profile, and they're able to use this as more of a recruitment tool that clicks through to their own website and their own volunteer management application form and system there. So let's take a look. You can also list your needs, and down here, the 12 Baskets Food Pantry has their food pantry helpers need. So we're gonna click on that, and this is what your need would look like. It just gives a short description. It gives some additional details down here at the bottom that helps people filter it. So if they're looking for something family friendly or that can have kids involved, you can list that. There are also a number of other things that you can list there to help people find your volunteer opportunity based on what they need and want and are looking for in a volunteer opportunity. If you see up here in the top right hand corner of this picture, it says respond. If somebody is looking at this and they want to volunteer and you have shifts available for this, then they would be able to select which shift. It would list them all, dates and times, and automatically like send them a reminder and send that information to you. So it would be very easy to keep up with who's coming in when. If you have your own volunteer management system, this would just send you an email saying, hey, this person is interested in volunteering. If they, for some reason, didn't read the full description that said, go to our website, then you can see, and it'll notify you in your inbox. You can see, oh, this person's interested, reach out, make sure they know that they should go apply on your website or, schedule themselves on your website. So it's helpful in that way as well. And yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So I just think this, again, could be a helpful opportunity or a helpful tool for you as you think about how you're going to proceed into this new future that sort of combines virtual and in-person services, depending on what your organization does and what your needs are. As the state service or volunteer platform, we really hope to represent all of our nonprofits out there to give Kentuckians a really great view of all the ways that they can volunteer and help your organizations put out their needs and promote those needs. And if it's useful to you, be a volunteer management tool for you as well. So if you have any questions about that, or you're interested in creating a profile, you can go to servekentucky.galaxydigital.com and create one. Or if you have some questions, I'd be happy to hop on the phone with you or get on a Zoom and screen share and walk you through the platform a bit more if it would be helpful. We just want to make sure it's helpful for you in whatever ways it can be. And I will send it back to Amy.
Well, so that was kind of our presentation today, and now I think we'll move into more of the question and answer to Merv. Do I need to stop sharing my screen?
No, you can leave that up. That's fine.
Okay.
So yes, folks, if you have any questions, again, please share them on the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll be happy to take them. So any questions you have around some of the tips and best practices that Amy shared, as well as anything around the Service Enterprise or the volunteer management tool, please let us know. We actually have a question here. We have a couple actually, but first one is, since we're talking about the volunteer management tool, is there a fee to have a profile on the Serve Kentucky site?
There is not. It is free for nonprofits in Kentucky. When you fill out the application to have an agency profile, it'll send a notification to Amy and I as site managers to approve it. So we would just go in, look at it, make sure that it's up to the things that we need it to be, and then approve that, and you would just have your agency there. And it's funded through the Volunteer Generation Fund, so it's grant funded. So as long as that grant continues, it will remain free.
Right, and we have built in some sustainability so that we can, and you're hosted under our platform, even if the grant funding went away tomorrow, we would be able to continue that service.
It sounds like a great opportunity, a great tool. So for those of you who might be still managing your volunteers, or via an Excel spreadsheet, or looking for ways to get up to date, this seems like a terrific opportunity. Again, on the online management tool, can the online management tool be used just for managing and tracking and not for recruiting? We use volunteers within our organization membership.
Within your organization membership. I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding what that means. As far as I know, it's very dependent or very engaging of volunteers. So volunteers need to go in there. You can respond for the volunteers within the platform. So you can act as if you're the volunteer. They do need to have a profile, an individual profile, in order for that to work out. So it is a bit of upfront work to get your volunteers used to this and transitioned over. But I think once you've done that upfront work, it will save you a lot of time, both managing and scheduling people and tracking that data. If you already have your own volunteer management way of doing things, whether that's a spreadsheet or some sort of software, and that works best for you, this would be a recruitment tool only. So if you're not looking to use it as a recruitment tool, it might not be that useful. if you already want to use your own way of managing volunteers. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, yes, if you need more information on that, please let us know. We actually do have an earlier question with regards to some of the things you shared, Amy, around the recommendations and suggestions. This organization had a question about online tutoring. Online tutoring is how, one question we have is about online tutoring is how to develop appropriate safety protocols when we have volunteers working one-on-one with kids. Do you have any ideas on that?
I don't have any specific. I could look for more examples for you, but I think that's a great point that's brought up is anytime that we all feel like we're so absorbed in a virtual world right now, but there are still safety protocols, the same safety protocols you'd have to do if you had it in person, the same, and then also a little bit different safety protocols you'd have to do if you had an in-person tutoring session. So obviously, like I'm sure your organizations probably do background checks. That would still need to take place. I will look into that because I do think that I've heard of there are some systems for setting up virtual volunteer or virtual tutoring where you can have an admin kind of role so that you have the ability to make sure and monitor, maybe not the entire session, but you would have the ability to check in and monitor that it's that everything is appropriate. So much just like if you're having an in-person tutoring session, I think you've got to keep a lot of those safety checks and protocols like background checks, a clear code of conduct for the volunteer and for the tutor or for the tutoree. But I will look in, I would be glad to look into to maybe I could query kind of our Points of Light board and our America Service Commission board about and even our AmeriCorps programs, because a lot of them do tutoring, but I don't know if any of them have moved to a virtual format, and see if there's some programs out there to help with safety checks. And if you email me at amy.potts@ky.gov, then I'd be glad to share that information.
Great, that's terrific. Thank you. Again, folks, if you have any additional questions for Amy or Allison, please let us know in the Q&A box, and be happy to ask that for you all. One question I had for you all was around volunteer acknowledgement and appreciation. What, obviously these are difficult times. What ideas or suggestions do you have that maybe organizations and nonprofits can do to recognize those who are continuing to volunteer their time during this pandemic?
That's a great question, Merv, because I think recognition is I personally think recognition of volunteers is always super important, but it's maybe even a little more critical now because it's just more critical now. But a couple things you can do right off the bat. So our office, servekentucky.gov, we do volunteer recognition certificates. So it's just a certificate, but it is signed by the governor. So, and I actually take care of that program. I go and make sure those are manufactured every Wednesday. So if you get me names and your organization, I can do that. And that's a little something. That's kind of in person. It's just a little something. We also host Governor Service Awards yearly. So it's a great time for you to honor your volunteers in a bigger way. Now this, I'm talking about next year because we've actually already done our nominations for 2020. And we had to end up postponing the ceremony. It's generally a great ceremony. It's in the governor's mansion, which we just couldn't do this year. So we're postponing it. It will happen in a different date. But what we're having to look at as an organization is a way to maybe do some virtual recognition. So we do have a program called the Champions of Service Awards, and we're thinking about going out this summer and maybe doing just a one-on-one presentation, socially distanced, of course, or whatever the volunteer feels safe about, and then broadcasting that on Facebook Live. So, we've had to kind of get creative. So that's what I would just urge others to do is look at creative ways of maybe virtual recognition. And, you know, it's kind of sad. We've heard about all the graduations and these great life events that have had to kind of take place online, but there's no reason you can't do that to recognize your volunteers. I think another thing the Service Enterprise Program does is goes a whole section about the value of volunteers and how you're valuing them outside of just number of hours and a monetary amount equated to that. And they give some great ideas for sort of that in-person recognition. But one of the things they talk about is that, you know, people just love to say, we see you, we see what you're doing, you know, so it doesn't necessarily have to be this grand gesture. But, you know, it could be as little as just knowing what that volunteer wants. You know, is it a shout out on Facebook right now, you know, or is it a nice handwritten letter from your CEO if they've just done this amazing work? And that's where, when we talked earlier about sharing stories, that's too a good opportunity for you as a volunteer coordinator or professional to get at some things that maybe your volunteers have been doing, or some things that are special to them. And so that can help you kind of formulate some different ways to recognize them that aren't necessarily a dinner, because we can't really do that right now, or an award ceremony. So, and in some ways I say this might be a chance to actually kind of individually recognize volunteers in a more special way.
No, that's terrific. That was really, really great. Love to see that certificate you all do. So if you have a mock-up or something like that.
Yeah, I can send that to you, Merv, if you want to share it with the group.
Yeah.
And I'll actually share the link, because you can order them online too.
Oh, sweet.
To me directly, or you can order them online. So.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, I think you had a follow-up to a previous question.
Yes. So I was thinking about Maggie's question about using Volunteer Kentucky as a management tool and not for recruiting. So I was thinking that you didn't want volunteers to really access it at all, but now I understand. Yes, you can use it as a management tracking tool for just the volunteers that you already have with your organization. There's a way to make the volunteer opportunities private, so only certain people can access that. You can make teams of volunteers within your agency as well, so you can just communicate with them directly through this platform, and they can come and respond. So you can use it as a scheduling tool, and then yes, it will track all of that data. Sorry, I got confused there, but you just have to set the privacy settings a certain way in order to make it. I mean, you will have a publicly visible profile, so people will still see your organization, and they may still be able to see the volunteer opportunities, but they wouldn't be able to respond to it or anything. So you wouldn't just get some random person you haven't been able to background check or go through your volunteer training program signing up for those shifts. So yes, there is a way to do that.
Great, thank you. So we still have time for questions. If folks have any additional questions for Amy or Allison, please again share them with us in the Q&A box. We'll probably take a minute or so to give people any additional time if they have questions to type them in. Otherwise, we can go ahead and close out our session for today. So it looks like we can go ahead and do that. So with that, Amy and Allison, thank you again for your presentation today. A lot of great tips and resources. We're really excited to learn about the volunteer management tools. Even better that it's free for nonprofits who want to take advantage of that. We are also looking forward to learning more about the Service Enterprise program that hopefully will launch sometime in the fall. So look forward to partnering with you all on that as well. So thank you again for today, and for everyone on the webinar, thank you for attending. We will send you a copy of the slide deck along with a link to this recorded webinar so you can replay it and share it with those you think could benefit from the information. If you don't see it by the end of the day tomorrow, please check your spam folder. And if you still don't see anything, please drop me a line and I'll be happy to send it out to you directly. After the webinar this morning, a link to a feedback survey will appear. So if you could, please take a couple minutes to fill that out. We greatly appreciate it. Finally, we have a few more webinars coming up. Next Thursday, we will host a session on managing the new routine with local leadership coach Greg Pesinger. And registration information on that can be found on the events page, as well as the emails and e-news that we send out on a regular basis. Again, as Ann mentioned earlier, we invite you to interact on our nonprofit community Facebook group page. And we also offering right now pro bono assistance with one of our consultants. So if you have any questions about anything that you're wanting to learn more about as we track this crisis, please let us know. So with that, on behalf of everyone here at CNPE, thank you again for joining us today. And we'll see you all again next time. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.